Hi there, my name is Mariko. I'm a multimodal therapist and intuitive. In today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And this is a really fascinating topic, especially if you're somebody who's interested in growth and your own self-development and evolution. The reason for this is that understanding these key differences between the conscious and subconscious mind is really going to help you to better cement these changes within yourself that you so desire, to be able to then see those changes manifest in your life. So in this video, we'll talk about these key differences. We'll talk about how the conscious mind, subconscious operate, and we'll talk about why the subconscious is so powerful and why it's actually the driver of change and transformation within yourself, and simple methods in which you can yourself get cooperation with the subconscious to be able to create lasting change in your life. Okay, let's dive straight in. Okay, so first of all, what is the conscious mind? What is the subconscious mind? A common metaphor that's used to describe the conscious versus the subconscious is that of an iceberg. So the conscious mind is usually likened to the top of the iceberg, everything that's above water that you can see. So it essentially represents everything about your mind that you are actively aware of right now. Everything about your mind that you're actively aware of right now. And the subconscious is everything underneath the surface of the water, the huge mass of the iceberg that you do not see, that you do not have awareness of. So the conscious mind's function is to help you navigate your day-to-day life. So it's involved in decision making, in an analysis, in all the sort of executive functions of the brain. You can liken it to the workings of the prefrontal cortex. So it's involved in your daily tasks, choice making, logic, rationalization, that kind of thing. And when change wants to happen, then it sounds on the conscious level like, I should quit smoking, or I deserve a healthy and loving relationship. So it's change that stems from this sheer willpower. Now, the subconscious, on the other hand, like I mentioned, is a lot vaster, and it is not apparent to us. It is what we are unaware of. And it is essentially a storehouse or a reservoir of all of our experiences and memories, ones that we are completely unaware of, ones that we have repressed, ones that we have forgotten about. It is also the realm of our emotions and our body responses, our automatic body responses. So within that, body sensations, for example, as well as the way that your body naturally reacts to something, to a new situation, or specific environments, context, situations. And also, it is the realm of our belief systems. This is also where all of our trauma is stored. And it's interesting because when I mentioned earlier that it controls the autonomic body responses, so of course this is things like your heart rate, all the functions in the body, etc. But also it means that memories that are somatic are all stored in the subconscious and are expressed and remembered through the body. So I'd really like to almost call the subconscious mind the subconscious body mind, because they are very much in this synergistic relationship. This is why if I were to ask you to think back to a upsetting memory, you're not just going to recall the memory in the form of, scenes in your mind. You're actually going to re-experience that memory in your body. So you might experience a contraction or, knots in the stomach, or an increase in your heart rate, simply by thinking back to that upsetting memory. So again, this highlights the link between the mind and the body, and how memory and trauma is stored in the subconscious somatically. So let's say you want to start a new habit. Let's say it's the new year, you create a New Year's resolution, you want to lose weight, so you're going to quit eating chocolate. Now, the reason that most of the time these New Year's resolutions fail is because we have not achieved cooperation from the subconscious mind. So when a new change wants to happen, the commitment, the instigation of that change begins at a conscious level, right? We say to ourselves, okay, this is what we're deciding on, this is what we're going to do. But then whether it's able to stay something that is consistent, all of that depends on the subconscious mind, and if you have cooperation from the subconscious level. So what I mean by that is, if on a subconscious level you have contradictory belief systems that would oppose or contradict your desire for the change. So for example, if you wanted to quit chocolate, but if on a subconscious level you believe, well, no, actually chocolate really makes me happy and I need chocolate in my life. If I didn't have chocolate, then I would not be able to function in my day-to-day life. Or if you had a belief that sounded a bit like, well, I know I'm inconsistent. I've always been told I'm not very disciplined, so there's no way that I could even maintain giving up chocolate for more than 2 months. Then it doesn't matter how much you will yourself to quit chocolate, it's just not going to happen. So this is why they say that if you want to start a new habit, you've got to stay consistent for at least 30 days. Why? Because for something to shift from a conscious directive to a subconscious behavior or habit, and we need that transition to happen for it to be lasting, repetition is one of the key factors to make this happen. Now, this is why, to a point, affirmations work. Because if you keep repeating an affirmation over and over and over again, then it starts to land on the subconscious level. And indeed, this is how brainwashing works, right? Through repetition. So, those horrible torture tactics that you hear of in prison, solitary confinement, and just the repetition of certain sounds or certain words or phrases can almost drive somebody insane, because you're really starting to get deep within the subconscious to change the operating system of the person. Now, on the opposite side, whatever is used to heal can be used to harm, and vice versa. So hypnotherapy really starts to use this repetition once we've accessed the subconscious for good. Because hypnotherapists know that when somebody is receptive on a subconscious level and you start to repeat certain commands, then it has chance to land within the subconscious and take root. So this is the whole premise behind hypnotherapy. So why is it that even with sheer willpower, we cannot necessarily affect lasting change within ourselves? Now, the key to this lies in the CCF, or what's known as the conscious critical faculty. So between the conscious and the subconscious mind lies a gatekeeper. Now, this gatekeeper is a little bit like an internal fact-checking system. And what this CCF does is it evaluates any incoming information and compares it to our pre-existing programming. So our pre-existing belief systems and experiences and identity to ascertain whether this new information that's coming in is reliable or true or not. So if I were to say to you, yesterday I walked past a house and their grass was all pink, then you would immediately reject that idea. Now that's because your conscious critical faculty was like, no, that doesn't match up with all of my pre-existing ideas about, the color of grass, right? So the issue with this, now of course the CCF has a role, it's important. We need to be able to think critically to be able to survive and navigate in this world. But the problem comes when we want to change something quite drastically because we know that some old system of ours is no longer serving us, it's no longer working for us. But the CCF comes in and says no. This goes against everything that we've experienced in the past, so it's not possible. Well, that's just not true. Just because it differs from anything you've experienced in the past does not mean it's not possible. It just means it differs from anything you've experienced in the past. So the CCF is biased towards protecting you and keeping you alive rather than keeping you or encouraging you to thrive. So, as a hypnotherapist, I've been trained to get somebody into a more relaxed, conducive state that is more receptive to new positive suggestions of change, right? So the way that we can then, as a therapist, get into somebody's old programming in order to upgrade it is to quieten down their CCF. And the way to do this is trance. So if you know what trance is, it is essentially an altered state of awareness where the brainwaves are slowing down and we're entering lower alpha brainwave states to theta brainwave states. These are the states that we use or we induce in hypnosis, in a hypnotherapy session, to be able to suggest positive changes to happen within the individual. So in such a session, what I do is I relax the client to a point that their brainwaves have slowed down enough, knowing that at that point, and I will see signs that people are in this state of hypnosis, I will see signs of this, such as slower breathing, possibly flickering of eyelids, the pallor changes, it starts to take on this sort of waxy appearance. And then I know that they're in trance. And then I know that their conscious critical faculty has quietened down, has kind of stepped aside, allowing me as the therapist to then access the subconscious of the person, to be able to then communicate with the subconscious of the person, to then encourage, suggest positive change. So this is very telling. It kind of tells you about how all of this works, right? Because the problem is when somebody is in a waking state, then their brainwave states are generally in a beta state where brainwave activity is quite fast. And when this happens, as a therapist, if I were to try to suggest some positive changes, affirmations, suggestions, it would just be rejected by the person's conscious critical faculty, or in other words, their defense mechanisms or their coping strategies. They will be experiencing resistance, and I will notice that resistance. So what does this mean for you? It means that if you want change, if you want a shift in your mindset, if you want to experience lasting change in your behavior, or if you want to start a new habit that sticks, then the best way to do this is to engage with the subconscious and get the cooperation of the subconscious, or try and bypass the CCF so that you can work within the subconscious. So how do you do this? Well, like I said earlier, repetition. Repetition is one of the steps. Now, this can take the form of affirmations. Affirmations do work to a point. It's just that it's not the fastest way, because you're going to have to repeat something over and over and over again, many times, to be able to start to rework those old stubborn programs in your mind. So a way to speed this up, number 2, is get yourself in an altered state of awareness, in a state of trance. How do you do this? Well, through meditation, through perhaps listening to a guided visualization, some kind of relaxation audio. And when you're in that relaxed state, you can then focus on what it is that you want. You can then visualize the change that you want to see in yourself. Or you could even record to yourself a bunch of affirmations and have them repeating once you're in that meditative state. The other thing that you can do, which I do often, if I want to come up with some kind of solution or inspiration to a block or a challenge that I'm facing, then what I do is I wait until those 2 moments in the day, just before falling asleep or just upon waking, when we are in that trance state. We're usually in a theta brainwave state in that moment, to then focus on the problem or the challenge that I'm facing in that state. And I say to myself, and I set the intention for me to come up with a solution, for the solution to be shown to me either in my dreams or shortly upon waking. So, of course, it takes you to remember to do this just before you fall asleep, but really set that as an intention just before you fall asleep. Focus on the challenge that you've got. Set yourself the intention that the solution will come to you. And it is incredible how often this works for me. And when I've suggested this to clients, it works for them too. So have a go at this. And guess what? The reason that I use hypnotherapy, EFT tapping, and regression therapy in my practice is because all 3 of these modalities engage the subconscious mind. And so therefore, we're really getting more deeper, lasting changes. So this is why in my EFT tapping videos, if you use them, you'll see that there is this ongoing repetition of phrases and movements, because actually what people don't realize is when they're tapping on themselves and they're activating the parasympathetic nervous system, we are actually getting into a slightly altered state of awareness. This repetition gets us into a light state of trance. So, people often find themselves kind of with their eyes a little bit glazed whilst they're tapping and repeating. Well, that's because they're in a light state of trance. And I also want to normalize a state of trance. This is a very normal thing for us humans to experience every single day. We enter states of trance throughout the day, every day. Even when we're driving, if you miss a turn or something, it's because your mind was elsewhere. You were in a state of trance. Daydreaming is a bit of a state of trance. Watching a film and being totally absorbed is a state of trance. So this is a normal thing to happen. And so this is also why EFT tapping works so well, because we're in a state of trance. The CCF is stepped aside. So therefore the repetitions, the affirmations are really getting into the subconscious mind. So I hope this has been helpful. If you like the video, do give it a thumbs up or maybe share it with a friend who might need to hear this right now. Wishing you a beautiful week.